I mean, welcome to another episode of Chats with Vlad. Episode 109, theoretically speaking, 4 illegal aliens. Tonight, boys and girls, I have some videos I wanted to share with you. Indeed. Some friends of mine, Ed90 and Hotbox, we got into a big conversation this week. It had to do with different species of aliens and different civilization types of aliens. And if you don't understand the difference between the two, you've come to the right place. By the end of this video, you too will understand the difference. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to my boy Yaz. Indeed, he was the one who put me on the track for theoretically speaking 4. But boys and girls, first, I do believe that we should have a little change of scenery, don't you? Indeed. Much better. You know how Uncle Vlad feels. It's all about environment. Indeed. And I brought us to a special place. A place where Uncle Vlad started doing the chats with Vlad. Indeed. It's a place I call my garden patio, or if you would, the garden of life and death. Let me show you what I mean. Everything here reflects a portion of Uncle Vlad's personality. Indeed. Very much so. Sometimes Uncle Vlad gets so caught up in things that he forgets the big picture. You see, boys and girls, Uncle Vlad recently got some new toys. Yes indeed. Let me show you one of them. This is also part of the reason why I wasn't able to put out an episode. You see, Uncle Vlad has so many cool little gadgets and toys and things that sometimes he forgets that less is better. But I digress. Let me show you my new toy, one of them. At first glance, it doesn't look like a whole lot. But then you have that. And the cool thing about this is I can change colors. I can even make it do amazing things. Unfortunately, last week, though, I also had a strobe light, one of those really good ones, the old ones that you have from Radio Shack. This is the effect that happens when you use a strobe light and all these other lights. and everything else I have going on here. This is the effect that you get. I uploaded this video last week and it was not impressive. Not at all. Onward to the show. I wanted to give greetings to my new clan, Blood Moon. It's a long story there. Long indeed. You see, first I was part of Darkthorn. I was the leader there. Then me and my officers, we found a clan that we thought suited us better called Bad Company. But then Bad Company became Nightfall. And then Uncle Vlad left for just a short period of time for a little bit of R&R. And when I came back, wouldn't you know it? Indeed, Nightfall became Skull and Bones. So anyway, Blood Moon, this is Uncle Vlad. Maybe now you understand my grim perspective on things a little bit better. I do hope to see new subscribers. And I do hope to see some likes. What I do for the love of my art. And I do it to inform you. And I do it to initiate conversation. Speaking of informing, I have some information for you. As I was saying, we were talking about aliens, but before we even talk about alien species and different types of aliens, we need to talk about the different types of alien civilizations. It goes all the way up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and on and on. But as my friend Michio Kaku here will tell you, we're not even type 0. My dear friends, let me introduce a scientist that when he was young, he wanted to be Albert Einstein. And indeed, Uncle Vlad believes he may have just succeeded. I present to you, boys and ghouls, Michio Kaku. He talks about a whole host of different things, from Yellowstone to aliens to the bloop, if you're hip to what that is. But he's a very serious scientist. I would take everything that he says quite seriously. Now, boys and girls, before we can even begin to talk about different species of aliens, we should really have a discussion on different alien civilization types, as in type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and they actually go up. But as Michio here will tell you, we're not even type 0. Indeed.
We physicists have often wondered, are there signs of intelligent life in the galaxy? And if so, how advanced might they be? So we categorize these alien civilizations on the basis of energy consumption. Type 1 would be planetary. They control the weather. They control anything planetary because they have the energy of a planet. Then there's type 2. A type 2 civilization has exhausted the power of their planet, and they use the sun. They basically take the energy from their sun to power their machines. Sort of like the Federation of Planets in Star Trek. Then there's type 3, galactic. They roam the galactic space lane. They play with black holes, sort of like the Empire of Empire Strikes Back. That would be a type 3 civilization. And then the question is, what are we? We are type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil, and coal. We don't even rate on this scale. we have not attained planetary energy at all. But what would it take to move between universes, to enter a black hole, to break the light barrier? You would have to reach the energy of type 3. This is called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is the energy of a black hole, is the energy of the Big Bang. It is the greatest energy in the universe. So how long before we can attain the Planck energy and move between universes? Well, a modest calculation shows that you would have to be about 100,000 years more advanced than us. Sorry about that. The next question is, how would we know of a type 3 or type 2 civilization if we were to bump into one? Let's say that scanning the heavens, we see evidence of a type 2, type 3 civilization. How would we know? Well, we've looked. We've looked for type 2 because type 2 civilizations give off an energy, a characteristic black body radiation that we can measure. So far, we find none. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't these civilizations out there. It just means that our devices are so primitive that we have not yet been able to conclusively show that they exist. But if they can go faster than the speed of light, then it's possible they may have the energy of a wormhole. And at that point, they would be type 3. They would have the Planck energy to create universes or to move between universes. Also, when we talk about intelligence in outer space, we have to be open to the idea that their intelligence may be quite different from our intelligence. And therefore, the question is, how do we tell where real intelligence is, given the fact that it could be more than one type of intelligence? Well, let me give you an example. That was in a swimming pool with dolphins. Sensors picked up the squeals and chirps from the dolphins, and then they ran it through a computer. They found, bingo, yes, they are intelligent. Yes, there's a pattern, a regularity to their chirps. And so it is possible to rank intelligence using computers that look for an algorithm. We'll do that in outer space now. In outer space, there's lots of garbage, there's lots of gibberish out there. And we think that most of the gibberish is just exploding stars, random events of no particular importance. But maybe using a quantum computer, we may be able to go through the mountains of data coming from outer space and find the signals of intelligence. Historically, when physicists were asked about flying saucers and UAPs and extraterrestrial civilizations, you just can't say that, gee, I saw something going across the sky last night. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. You have to have data. About 90% of these sightings can be explained using natural phenomena, or weather anomalies, or weather balloons. But 10% of them seem to defy the known laws of engineering. So we have to look at them very carefully. Very little data has been collected until recently. And we physicists need data so that we can make objective statements about what these things are. The burden of proof is on the military now to prove that these things aren't extraterrestrial. And that's a sea change. We now realize that these objects can travel up to Mach 20 times the speed of sound. And they can even fly underwater, believe it or not, underwater, in the air, into outer space. And they zigzag. When you calculate the centrifugal force inside the rocket ship, you realize that any living thing would be crushed by the zigzagging of these objects, whatever they are. So in other words, we're talking about a new law of engineering beyond anything that we can muster here on the planet Earth. So is it an optical illusion, or is it extraterrestrial? We don't know until we analyze the data. Now we have the data, and now we have physicists looking frame by frame and perhaps coming up with a conclusion as to where these objects come from.
Ah, yes indeed. Michio Kaku is one of my favorite scientists, boys and girls. And unlike that hack, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's not bought and paid for by the federal government. I'd add Bill Nye's science guy, but he's not even a real scientist. I don't know if you knew this or not, but the lead singer for The Offspring debated him and beat the pants off of Bill Nye. Now then, boys and girls, I want to ask you this question about the aliens. Are the aliens kind, benevolent aliens? Peaceful, loving ones? Are they aliens that have more malevolent intentions? Ones to harm us? Ones to take away our freedom? What kind of aliens are we talking about? Well, in this next section, we're going to show you several different types, from the grays to the little green men that you hear about. Even some Aryan ones and reptilioids. Now then, boys and ghouls, there's so many different types of aliens that Uncle Vlad didn't want to get things wrong. So I introduced to you a channel called Unveiled. Check them out. I thought personally that they put the big picture together quite beautifully. Indeed.
When you hear the word alien, what do you picture in your head? Are they short or tall, green or gray? And what key features do they have? If people who claim to have actually met aliens are to be believed, then there are certainly good and bad kinds out there, but also many different types. So you need to know how to distinguish between them. This is Unveiled, and today we're taking a closer look at the different types of alien you should know about. Do you need the bigly speaking? No one truly knows what aliens are going to look like. And any version of life that develops on other planets could well be drastically different from our own. With just a sample of one to build from, life on Earth, it's difficult to calculate or even predict what the rest of space could have in store, besides presumably infinite variety. However, there are those on Earth who claim to have already seen aliens, sometimes via an alien abduction. Survivors of these encounters have differing stories, but the most common themes include scientific experiments, invasive probing, and the taking of samples, sometimes via quite intimate means. While the overall narratives often overlap, however, what an alien physically looks like can vary. There apparently are different types to contend with, and with some surprises. For example, although the image of little green men has long been popular in society and science fiction, genuinely reported abduction cases rarely include such a creature. Other alien kinds are much more common in sightings. The Greys are by far the most popular depiction among those claiming to have met with aliens in real life. They're described as having a generally humanoid composition and sharing certain characteristics with us, although they're often shorter, have larger heads, bigger, darker eyes, and a distinctly gray skin tone. This particular alien won't be unfamiliar to you. The Greys are still today sci-fi favorites, and something of a worldwide phenomenon. Going from most abduction accounts, they don't usually speak as such, but instead communicate telepathically from their minds to yours. The Greys aren't usually overly hostile, but they're not averse to causing an abductee pain either, so long as they get the information they want.
Oh. What about the Greys? What about the Greys?
Similarly, the Greys are said to be extremely intelligent but lacking emotion. So even if they're not ill-meaning, they are ruthless. As such, abductees claim that the Greys will probe and take samples, seemingly in order to create hybrids. And their rise to become perhaps the archetype for what an alien should look like, at least during the 20th century, can be traced back to one of the most infamous abduction stories in history, that of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. While it was the Greys, too, who were supposedly at the center of the Roswell crash in 1947. According to a map remembered by Betty Hill, a map she claims to have seen as a projection inside an unknown alien ship, her Greys at least, came from the far-off binary star system of Zeta Reticuli. If true, they've traveled many, many light years to become humankind's Alien 101. Another version of ETs, though, is much more animalistic to our eyes. Rather than smooth all over like the Greys, they can be scaly, armored, and less humanoid. They're variously known as the Archons, Saurians, or Draconians. And while descriptions differ in science fiction and in claimed real-world encounters, these beings are generally said to be a few feet taller than us. Again, the stories of them do differ, but they're usually said to be ancient and far longer lived than we are. It's said that they walked the surface of Earth thousands, perhaps millions of years before humanity did, but were in fact forced underground by the arrival of another type of alien in our planet's distant past called the Anunnaki. In some retellings, the Anunnaki are closer to God than alien, and are alleged to have hailed from the lost planet Nibiru. But whatever they were, they allegedly triggered these previous aliens to retreat and hide in a large, complex, and until now undiscovered cave system far below the Earth's crust. Of course, until now there is no real-world evidence of any such thing, and indeed it's a general idea that has gone on to fuel many a modern and dangerous conspiracy theory. However, some have also drawn comparison between these alternate aliens and the revered gods of ancient times. The Egyptians, for example, worshipped a god called Sobek that possessed a humanoid figure but the head of an alligator, while similar animal-human entities appear across other belief systems too. Rumors of such creatures in the here and now could also relate to various claimed sightings of straight-up monsters all over the world map. In one case, there's the legend of the Lizard Man of Scape Ore Swamp in South Carolina, who's said to target unsuspecting passers-by, and in particular, stranded cars and their drivers. But finally, and while the invading Greys and Saurians perhaps should be easy to spot in the open, so-called Nordic aliens probably wouldn't be. In fact, a defining characteristic of them is that they should seamlessly blend with humankind, because they're an extremely close physical match for us. In some cases, they're described as resembling the Norse gods, like Thor, who himself might be considered a Nordic alien were he to ever appear on our planet. Further Norse variations include the Pleiarans, which are said to have originated in a bright and bursting star cluster known as the Pleiades. While other alien types, humanoid or not, are generally painted as having a clearly frightening or unique appearance, Nordics are much subtler, which in itself perhaps makes them a little scarier, although they're widely said to be benevolent and good rather than evil. Like the Greys, Nordic aliens are said to heavily rely on psychic energy. They communicate telepathically and can also live for thousands of years or more. Again then, they're presented as beings of infinite wisdom compared to humans. They're also at times linked with or crossed over with so-called Venusian aliens, said to come from Venus with startling beauty. It's as though, when they appear in alien encounter stories, Nordic and Venusian aliens are a reflection of humankind, usually at its best. And some versions of alien lore suggest that the Nordics do cross paths with the Greys. Here, the Greys are emotionless but efficient, while Nordic aliens are emotionally astute and much more cognitively complex. Which is another reason why this type of alien, if it is out there, would be difficult to spot. Nordics wouldn't struggle with anything about the human way of life. In fact, they'd probably be better at it than even we are. Of course, such is the rich diversity of reported alien history, this still isn't all there is. Other, rarer and lesser-known alien varieties allegedly include a race known as the Arcturians. These are perhaps the ET type that is closest to the little green men stereotype, said to stand around 5 feet tall, with big ancient eyes and green skin. Another more obscure reported variety is the avians, a bird-like species, often with a bluish color, that features in some much contested retellings of how the pyramids were built. Thankfully, both the Arcturians and the avians are generally said to be kind and to come in peace, and often, allegedly, to help us lowly humans reach some kind of spiritual awakening. But what's your verdict? We know that alien abduction stories are becoming commonplace in the modern day. The skepticism that surrounds them perhaps isn't likely to disappear until an alien presence on Earth is officially recognized the world over. But until then, we have mounting descriptions to add color, texture, mood, and motivation to our ever-growing and shared mental image.
One more thing I want you to think about too. After seeing all those alien civilizations, ask yourself, what might our planet have that they want? See, this is what you need to think about, is intent. You think they want to come down here and just spread galactic knowledge with us for the betterment of everybody? I don't think any species in the galaxy, in the universe, works like that. If they want something, are they testing on human beings? Do they want our water? Are we like big meaty fluid bags for them to stick silly straws in like killer clowns from outer space and they just suck our fluids out? Or maybe it's gold. I want you to consider something, boys and girls. Until about, I'd say 100, maybe 150 years ago, gold was shiny baubles to us like diamonds or rubies or anything else. But it had no aesthetic uses to us. Only in the last 100, 150 years have we learned it's one of the best conductors. Have we learned that it's good for various microsurgeries. Indeed, it can cure and cancel out certain cancers that are caused by various radiations. And did you know if you cut it into little microfilaments and put it in the atmosphere, it can also block out said radiations? Think about it. I wanted to take a second to give a shout out and a thank you to the Big Think and also Professor and Dr. Michio Kaku, PhD, baby. And also for the different alien species that came from Unveiled. Give credit for credit is due. That's what Uncle Vlad says. Indeed. And now it's time for Uncle Vlad's favorite time. Indeed. It's time for funny ha-ha. And tonight, because we're talking about aliens and space, and because NASA's been laughing at the American people for years and years, really decades, I think it's time we laughed at NASA a little bit tonight. What does NASA stand for, boys and ghouls? Need another 7 astronauts. Indeed. Where do astronauts spend their vacation, boys and ghouls? All over Florida. How'd they know that one of the astronauts had dandruff, boys and girls? They found her head and shoulders. Why do all astronauts have blue eyes? Because one blew this way and one blew that way. How many astronauts can you fit in a Volvo? All of them if you put them in the ashtray. But we don't want to be too harsh, do we? How about this one? What did Spock find in the officer's toilet on the USS Enterprise? He found the captain's log. What does the USS Starship Enterprise and the roll of toilet paper have in common, boys and ghouls? They both orbit Uranus looking for Klingons. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for tonight, boys and girls. But before we go, boys and girls, I want you to think about this. How long will it take humanity before we can even reach Type 1 civilization? And I want you to think about also all the various different types of aliens that are out there, boys and ghouls. Indeed, will we be able to defend them? Defend our home? Are they peaceful? Or are they violent? And let me ask you one more question, boys and girls, something really juicy to think about. Are they even aliens? A lot of people have been saying there's going to be a red flag event where there's going to be false alien attacks. A lot of people have said that this is reverse engineered equipment. Maybe it came from a civilization a long time ago and they found it. Or maybe one did crash. But I gotta tell you, the thought of somebody being able to travel beyond the speed of light years, hundreds of light years, all across the galaxy, only to crash on a backwoods planet like Earth? Think about it!